you told us earlier that your the personal subjective dimension to your research was so strong that you constructed an observation tower, not just to observe objects, but to provoke whatever's behind the objects, what you call the control system. So here's a question for you, coming again from one of our members whose name is Sue. And I think it's a difficult question to ask you publicly, but I still want to try it. Do you have any personal conclusions about UAP and why they're here?
Um, in science, you rarely reach, you, of course, you hope to reach a conclusion, but you're always aware that it's a temporary conclusion on the way to something else. And usually people ask me in a much more direct way, at your age, aren't you afraid that you're going to die without knowing what it is, which is a more direct way of asking the same question. Your, correspondent is very polite. Um, the um, I don't care. I mean, that's if you ask, Dr. Nolan, who has many discoveries to his credit, do you want to solve the problem of cancer? He probably would say, we've already made a lot of progress, and there are types of cancers that we can cure or detect early enough to cure. There are other types that we just don't understand at all. And the um, we will at some point, if as science makes progress. But any scientist has to expect to die without having all the answers. Um, I think that we relativity has given us a number of answers in physics, but we now find that that's insufficient to explain the contradictions that we have with quantum mechanics and so on, and the contradictions continue. And that's been the case for almost a century, that we haven't overcome the contradictions. So, yes, you make small advances, and once in a while you make a big advance. I think the important thing now, I mean, it's great that Congress is doing this work and so on, and I have a lot of respect for it, having been part of congressional hearings on other things, in the use of information networks for managing crises and so on, where I was asked to be part of the process of, as a technical witness. So I know how it works, and I have a lot of respect for that work. The in the lab, I'm not trying to evade the question. It's a big question. What I hope is to have a chance to explore the idea that we're dealing with a meta system, not just a system. And what we were designing with Mr. Bigelow was a meta system, an assembly of good observations that we could refine and then take up to the next level. And I think that's what is not being done. And that the people who are trained to be, the troops that would help us refine that system the project has been shut down for reasons I never understood, and the financing was terminated, and that's gone. It's evaporated. So I'm not going to jump into just hoping that this thing is going to happen again. I think those things happen rarely, that you can assemble the kind of talent that Dr. Colm Keller assembled with Mr. Bigelow, on in the days of Bass, and the support we had from Washington at the time. It was very small, but I think that we were on the way to getting the right questions answered. So I would hope somebody would do it again. It's not going to be me. Uh, I would hope uh, to get some certainty about the nature of the dialogue with the phenomenon. You know, what kind of dialogue is it? Is it just like a dialogue between us and a whale, for example, or an ape, or a bird that we can develop? And there are a number of experiments to do that. There are experiments also on how you would communicate with aliens that have not been disclosed, but we know they exist. I know specifically that from people who were involved in those experiments that they exist. And I think that's a big hope for me, that we can go forward to that and build the kind of language constructs that would enable us to tap into that higher level. I mean, we know there have to be higher levels of existence, and we know that they can communicate with us by sharing the space. I mean, we communicate with all kinds with ants and mice that don't necessarily are not necessarily interested in a dialogue with us. But in in this case, it's going to be vital for us in terms of survival of humans to communicate in a way that's intelligent, even though we may be in some ways at lower levels from what we're perceiving. And I think that's what we need to come to grips with, from certainly from what I can bring to the party, which is the information science and meta science side of it.